It is the 4th of July.
It is.
244 years. 244 years. Can you think about that? 244 years. And for most of that time, 90% of the gospel work around the world has been coming from this place. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
90% of the gospel work has been coming from this place.
America, right?
Until 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then it began to stop. It began to stop because we began to fade as being America. You know, for all of the folderol and nonsense we hear in the media, and unfortunately even in many of the churches, our founding fathers were folks that understood, not religion, they understood Christianity. We were founded by people of faith. Mayflower came and there was not one unsaved person on board that became a part of this nation. 66% were Sabbath keepers, 33% were Puritans who were trying to purify the wicked Church of England. Trying to face down kings. They died for their faith, many of them. Their relatives were killed, slaughtered, cut in two, burned at the stake, beheaded. Many of them had arms and legs cut off before they were murdered by the state and by the church. So it is particularly poignant that we, America, understand who we are. Even now, we're being told that you can still go to a bar, you can still go to a liquor store, you can still slaughter the baby in your womb, but they're thinking about closing down the churches again. How many of the mega churches have opened back up in town? Hardly any. They're all still closed. The greatest healing balm in all of creation, faith. The greatest healing balm for a nation and they're closed. And many of them, by the way, by executive decree, and satanic mayors and satanic governors around the country. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. We can riot, burn buildings, tear down statues, rape, pillage, murder. But you can't peacefully assemble to protest the closing of churches, because if you do, the governors will have you arrested. A preacher in Tampa was arrested for the high crime of talking about God in his church. Give me liberty or give me death. You know where that comes from? One of our founding fathers, Samuel Adams, walked into a town and he said, "Why is that man being beaten? Man in stocks being ripped to pieces with a cat of nine tails. You know his crime? He was preaching the gospel without a license." And now we're arresting preachers for preaching the gospel. In fact, many of them are so scared they won't even open their churches back up. COVID-19 is an atheist disease. You see, you can riot with 100,000 people and burn buildings, tear up people's lives, destroy everything they worked for. You don't get COVID-19 doing that. But you do get COVID-19 if you go to a house of worship and talk about the things of God. It's an atheist disease. It seeks out people in churches. It's like a heat-seeking missile. We can gather to destroy the culture, the emblems of our past. Listen, why is it important that we keep things like Confederate statues? Why is it important that we keep even those things which we find appalling? Because they remind us of where we have been and where we have come. Because if we don't know the filth, the dirt, the things that we did that were evil, we can return to them. Like a dog returning to his own vomit. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Unless there's a disease, then everything's off. Or unless we don't like what you have to say, then everything's off. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. Unless, of course, you're in New York, Michigan, California, Illinois, Washington, D.C. This isn't where we've come from, folks. This isn't who we are. And it grieves me. Grieves me on this 4th of July. I'll tell you, folks, this has been a tough week for me. As you know, I preached an hour and 40 minutes last week.
We remember.
To the destruction of the anatomical parts that we won't even talk about today. I decided this week, if I'm going to preach this long, I'm going to sit down and have everybody here stand up. So. It's been a tough week because we talked last week for an hour and 40 minutes about end-time Babylon, who it was. And when you take those 30 categories the Bible lays out, there is no other nation on earth that can fit, unfortunately, into that pattern, into that form, that mold, but America. None. I've tried for nearly 30 years now to find a way around what Scripture says, what Jeremiah says, what Revelation says, what Joel says, what Isaiah 24 says, what Revelation 6, what Revelation 12 or 14 and 18 say. You cannot get around it. Prophecy is prophecy is prophecy. And it's in God's Word. It's in Yahweh's Word. So you can't escape it. But we can stay at the hand of Yahweh. How do we know? Because we've got examples. Look at the rebellion of Korah, which we talked about 3 weeks ago. The rebellion of Korah. He comes against God and he comes against Moses and Aaron. And he's got 2 brothers with him and they're destroyed by fire. And Korah and all of the 250 followers with him and their families and their goods and their tents and their livestock and everything, the ground opens up and swallows them. Now, Israel's seen a pretty good sized miracle here. Fire falls from heaven and wipes these 2 guys out, these 2 brothers. And by the way, all their family, all of their livestock, all of their possessions. Then the ground opens up and swallows the rebellious ones. What does Israel do? They come and say, God, Moses, we're mad at you about this. Moses, you killed these people. This is on you. And God says, yeah, right. And he sends a plague. And before Moses can send Aaron out to stand between the dying and the living, 14,700 die. But God told Moses to send Aaron, and he did. And Aaron stayed the hand of Yahweh. The hand of judgment was stopped. We can't change prophecy. We can stay the hand of Yahweh. Knowing what I know, knowing that this is the 4th of July, this has been a painful week. I've been fighting depression, I've been fighting rage, I've been fighting so many emotions about this. Because I love this country. This place is my heartbeat. This is America. This is our heritage. George Washington said, while we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we ought not be inattentive to the higher duties of religion. To the distinguished character of a patriot, it should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian. Do you think these guys understood patriotism? You can be a zealot without being a patriot. But you cannot be a patriot, a true patriot, without being a Christian. Because you have no idea what the balm for the nation is. If you take Messiah out of the equation of America, there is no America. What made us an exceptional people? It wasn't because we were better than everybody else or smarter than everybody else. It is because of our heritage. We are still living on the heritage of our fathers. Washington understood it. John Adams understood it. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized by pomp and parade with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and an illumination from one end of this continent to the other from this time forward and more. Why? What were they celebrating? What was John Adams? John Adams was a preacher. We ought to be celebrating the gift that God gave us, America. But instead, we are riding in the streets and burning down our heritage. Thomas Jefferson, the supposed deist, who, by the way, made a spiritual argument for separation with England, not a political argument. He said the rights of life, liberty, and happiness, or pursuit of happiness, were an endowment of the Creator. And therefore only the Creator had the right to touch that endowment. So King George, when you touch that endowment of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you're a heretic. And that's where we've got to separate from you and from England. Why we've got to break those political bands. Because you're a heretic. Supposed deist. Thomas Jefferson said, God who gave us life gave us liberty. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are a gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and that his justice cannot sleep forever. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why I've had a hard week. Because his justice won't sleep forever. There will come a point in time when the innocent blood of 62 million dead children is going to come back. There will be a time when the 250, 275 million abortions we have exported around the world will come to roost. He told Manasseh, because you have filled the streets of Jerusalem with innocent blood, a sin which I will not pardon, I will punish this land. He said, if you grab the very horns of the altar, I'll rip you from it to destroy you. John Hancock. By the way, John Hancock, remember that big John Hancock signature that you see on the Constitution? You know why he did that? Because he stuck it in the king's face all the time. And he wanted the king to know who he was signing this. The king would go through the forests, private forests, your forest, my forest, the forest that we owned. And he would mark the trees. He would paint the trunks white, and those were the ones that the king's men would come through and cut. for masts for the ships. The ships that were going to be used to come against America. John Hancock had this nasty little habit of going through the forest right after the guys with the paint came through. He'd cut the trees and steal the masts and sell them for what would be the American vessels. The king had a bounty on his head. He wanted him dead. So when John Hancock signed the Declaration of Independence, he signed real big. Because he wanted King George to know, I'm still here. You didn't get me. He said, resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual. Continue steadfast and with a proper sense of your dependence upon God. Nobly defend those rights which heaven gave and no man ought to take from us. It's a big deal. Why? Because you are made in the image of God. And what is the image of God? What did Adam and Eve have? They had free choice. They walked in liberty. Now, they made a wrong decision, but in the image of God, they were made to have free choice. The animals don't have free choice. They have instinct. So when they teach our kids in school that man is just another animal, the highest on the food chain, it's a lie. It's idolatry. Man is not an animal. He is body, soul, and spirit. He has a body, a mind, and an eternal spirit. Thomas Paine. Those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, undergo the fatigue of supporting it. We have done very little to support the fatigue of keeping freedom. We have let governors and governments overtake us. They tell us now that we have to send our kids to schools that are diametrically opposed to everything we believe, and if we don't, we are falling under penalty of law. Isn't that interesting? If you decide not to have your kids indoctrinated with idolatry, you fall under penalty of law. You know, back in the early days of this country, young boys did not even start school until they were 12 or 13 years old because they were not equipped emotionally, they were not physically mature enough for the rigors of school. But from 13 until about 17, they went through what is the equivalent of a college education. Were the kids a lot smarter then? They could do it in 4 years instead of 14 or 16 or 18 years? No. But they weren't getting government subsidies to keep them in those schools. And look at these inner city schools around Dallas, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Los Angeles, San Francisco. What are they? They're hellholes that we trap children in. Violence, drugs. We say, you've got to attend. Well, you won't get an education if you don't. Listen, you think they're getting an education? We have a nation of functional illiterates because this education system here is deteriorated. It's not on them, it's on us. We let it happen. You wonder why these kids are filled with rage? Look at their lives. Look at the laws we've passed. With them we oppress the poor. We protect the wealthy. There's some antitrust laws that grant exemptions for just about everybody. Who do they help? All of the illegal immigration, who does it hurt? Does it hurt the top of the food chain? No. These people profit from it. Who does it hurt? The entry-level worker. The guy that doesn't have the great big fancy sheepskin on the wall. That's who it hurts. What happens? We've got 40 million illegals living here. They cost us about $500 billion a year. Imagine what that would do for education. Real education, I mean. But what does it do? It instead subsidizes wealthy corporations who don't want to pay a living wage to average Americans so they can do a job and survive. So we use the immigration system to support big business and take jobs from Americans. It's wrong. I don't care how you cut it, it's wrong. Think what $500 billion would do for vets. Excuse me, $500 billion. I'm saying billion. $500 billion. That's what we spend on illegals here. Education, crime, welfare, food stamps, housing, medical. Do you know what it costs to go to an emergency room now? Imagine what that would do for our vets. For the people that have served this country honorably. Who've given arms and legs. And sometimes mental capacity. How many of these people are running around? Katie and I worked with homeless people here in Dallas. The vast majority of them were Vietnam vets. The vast majority of them were shell-shocked. Most of them had seen things in war that they couldn't forget. Most of them had seen more than the human spirit could carry. I remember one guy said, I can't sleep. The only relief I have is passing out. He was a sniper. He said, I keep seeing the faces. Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces. Can you imagine having to live your life like that? Those who won our independence believed liberty to be the secret of happiness, and courage to be the secret of liberty. Where's the courage? The mayor of Seattle hides in her bunker while they set up the CHOP, some sort of autonomous zone, where rape, murder, drugs, violence is the rule of the day. Guess when she finally decided to end the CHOP? When one of the city council members, an avowed socialist, led a whole group of protesters, CHOP-type people, out to her house. Then she decided it was a crisis. Like I always say, COVID is not a pandemic, unless I get it. Then it's a pandemic. Well, vicious rioters threatening the lives of ordinary people isn't a problem. They show up at the mayor's house, suddenly then it's a problem. We've got a problem. It's easy to take liberty for granted, folks, when you've never had it taken from you. George Washington said, guard against the impostors of pretended patriotism. When I hear people like Nancy Pelosi crying patriotism, saying she's praying for the nation, my next question would be to her, what God are you praying to? The God that loves abortion? The God that hates real Christian principles? That God? Because I know who that God is. Israel found that God. And God removed them from the promised land when they found that God. That was his own chosen people. His people. Handpicked by him. Led through the wilderness by his hand. Pillar of fire by night, the cloud by day. Fire to light the way at night, the cloud to shield them during the day. His hand. He parted the Red Sea. He destroyed the ensuing army, his people, his own people, and he removed them from the land. He said, if you do what those before you here have done, the land itself will vomit you out. His people. He said, but you didn't do what the people before you did. You did worse, much worse. And the land vomited them out. Do we Americans think that we are so special that the land won't vomit us out? Do you think we can continue killing 62 million babies and the land not vomit us out? Do you think we can condone homosexuality and adultery and every fornication under the sun and the land not vomit us out? Do you think we can pass corruption into law and the land not vomit us out? Do you think God is a just God? Do you think Yahweh is just? Or do you think he's just a silly old grandfather sitting up in heaven looking down and shaking his head, disappointed in what we've done? He's a God of judgment. He has proven that throughout Scripture. John Adams, U.S. President, second, by the way, President of the United States. Suppose a nation in some distant region should take the Bible for their only law book, and every member should regulate his conduct by the precepts there exhibited. Every member would be obliged in conscience to temperance, frugality, and industry, to justice, kindness, and charity towards his fellow man, and to piety, love, and reverence toward Almighty God. What a utopia! What a paradise would this region be? Now, these founding fathers weren't Christian, though. That's just mythology, right? See, they understood things of God. Why did they understand it? Because they remembered the Mayflower. They remember who came on that ship. They remember the 82 souls on board and who they were and why they came. They came because they were looking for a place where God's people could worship without the fear of being slaughtered for their faith. It is the 4th of July. And it is a time of sadness for me. Because I look around and I see what America is, what it's become. And I want with all my heart to celebrate. Because I see the reality of who we are and what we've become. And yes, we live by faith. But I also have faith that God is a just God, that Yahweh is just, and that his scales are always balanced. Now, after 20 minutes, I haven't even gotten to the text. Maybe we should just take the collection and go home. Oh, that's right, we don't do a collection. Jeremiah 51, 7 through 14. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, and made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, and therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen, destroyed. Howl for her. Take balm for her pain. If so, she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her. Let us go every one to his own country, for her judgment reaches unto heaven, and is lifted up even to the skies. The Lord hath brought forth our righteousness. Come, and let us declare in Zion the work of the Lord our God. Make bright the arrows, gather the shields. The Lord hath raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord and the vengeance of his temple. Set up a standard upon the walls of Babylon. Make the watch strong. Set up the watchmen. Prepare the ambushes. For the Lord hath both devised and done that which he spake against the inhabitants of Babylon. O thou that dwellest upon many waters, abundant in treasure, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness. The Lord of hosts hath sworn by himself, saying, Surely I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. And Revelation 14:8, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Covetousness. Interesting that the Lord would mention covetousness. One of the sins that drives America, covetousness. Now we remember last week, we went through the whole litany of all of those proofs about America. Unavoidable. If you haven't seen that portion of this message, you need to look at it. Because all of my heart wants to say it isn't so, but my spirit knows the truth. Revelation 18. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Is there any other nation? Remember, ancient Babylon was destroyed long before Revelation was written. So he ain't talking about that Babylon. And by the way, that Babylon is still inhabited. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye not receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Remember her even as she reward her even as she has rewarded you. And double unto her double according to her works. The cup which she hath filled, fill her double. What cup? Cup of trembling. Every nation has a cup of wrath. Nations aren't judged in eternity. Nations are judged now. And it says that America, this end-time Babylon, has been a golden cup in the hand of the Lord. What's cup? Cup of wrath. And all of the nations have drunk of that cup of wrath. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. You know, we got a plague running through America. I have read a lot of scriptures, and I can't find anywhere where a plague is good news. Plagues are judgment. Plagues are judgment. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she hath said in her heart, I sit a queen. I am no widow. I shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine. And she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. First seed of our destruction was planted some time ago. Way back in the time of Woodrow Wilson. We got the Federal Reserve, which is unjust weights and measures because they created dollars out of thin air. They loan them to us, and we take them. They have no right to do that. It's false weights and scales because there is no money behind it. It's just the printing press. It is the same system which controlled Europe before that, the same system which now controls all the world. Why did we want China in the World Trade Organization? And they say, well, there is no central bank, there is no Federal Reserve in China. Yes, there is. They're part of the World Trade Organization. Everybody is a part of the globalist currency system. But we accepted that. The church accepted it. You see, they set us apart. They said, you can have a 501c3, which means you're tax exempt. We're not tax exempt. We're untaxable. The church is above the state. The state isn't above the church. You can't serve two masters. Period. So you got to decide which master are you going to serve. You see, they say if you're a 501c3, you can't talk about politics. Unless you're a leftist, then you can talk all you want about it. But if you happen to be a Christian conservative, you can't talk politics from the pulpit. Well, fortunately, I'm not a 501c3, so I can say anything I want to say. I can say anything the Lord tells me to say. And the Lord tells me to say that neither party is honorable. Rights come from God, and when government sends people to usurp those rights, they have become idolatrous. You have a right not to just believe what you want, but to practice your faith. It isn't about believing what you want, it's about practicing your faith. And when you lose that, when you allow them to take that, when you allow them to control that, you have grieved the heart of Yahweh. We lost the church. It started in 1917 with Woodrow Wilson, who was a terribly evil man. He was a bigot, a segregationist. You know, the nation after the Civil War was integrating nicely. Woodrow Wilson came in, and the first thing he did, this brilliant Democrat that they honored so highly, the first thing he did was resegregate the military and resegregate the post office. And then he led the nation into bigotry nationwide. FDR did the same thing, a lot more subtly, but the same thing. FDR knew exactly what was going on in Auschwitz and in the concentration camps and did nothing. That's innocent blood. And then the church decided that we were going, well, I'll tell you, we got a little history in the church. You remember the Vietnam War? Well, in Vietnam, there was only a couple of exemptions to get out of going to the military. One of them was to duck into a seminary. If you were a seminary student, you didn't have to go. So every left-winger in the world suddenly found religion. And they all ducked into seminaries. And guess what? They've been around long enough now that they're the theological professors. They've taken over the once Christian university. You know, Harvard and Yale were both Christian universities. Now look at them. They're the gates of hell. But even many of our Christian colleges have been taken over by leftists. Why? Because they ducked in the 70s. They grew to prominence, they got their doctoral degrees, and now they're all running big churches, and they're all running seminaries, and they're all running universities, and they're all running the theological institutes. Probably the least Christian people in all of the planet are the Christian professors who teach religion and theology at large universities. There are literally a handful of true Christian universities left on this planet. And in doing that, what did we do? We decided that preaching hell, preaching the blood, preaching the cross, preaching justification and sanctification, that sin is still sin, well, we got to be tolerant. You know, I mean, we live and let live, right? We live by faith, not by works. So you can live like hell and hope to attain to heaven. Well, it doesn't work that way. Scripture says, here's how you know if you love God. You keep His commandments and they're not grievous to you. You don't even know what the commandments are anymore. So we lost the church. They stopped preaching the blood. They stopped preaching Messiah. And now we have nice little homilies. We got little Joel Osteen homilies that are wonderful. They make us feel so good about ourselves. In the old days, it was Robert Schuller homilies. But the blood's not there. Why did God reject Cain's sacrifice and accept Abel's? Because Abel brought the blood, Cain brought the wave offering and skipped the blood. And without the blood, there is no Calvary. With no Calvary, there is no resurrection. With no resurrection, there is no first fruits. There is no justification. So we have these monuments to idolatry on every street corner that no longer preach the God of the Bible. They preach this new one we found. His name used to be Baal, but we kind of changed it now. Now we call it progressive Christianity. That's not where we've come from. That's not who we were. For there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation, ungodly men, turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness and denying the only Lord God and our Lord Jesus Christ. Jude 1:4. Lasciviousness. What is lasciviousness? It's license. You license that which God doesn't license is called lasciviousness. God has another word for it, sin. Be sure your sin will find you out. In America, your sin is finding you out. That's the problem. Our sin has found us out. Why is there rage and rebellion in the streets? Why are they looting and burning and killing each other? Because they're lost. And why are they lost? Because we led them into the wilderness. The church told them that they could live like they lived and it didn't matter. That was the first seed of our destruction. You wonder why they're raging? They're raging because they've been lied to and they know it, and they don't know what the lie is. All they know is that they've been lied to, and they have been. Government lied to them and said, "My government shall supply all your needs according to their riches and glory." So we've made junkies of a population, dependent upon somebody to take care of us. God said, "I'm your provider." Our politicians have been corrupted. We call it campaign contributions, but what is it? It's a bribe. When you take millions and millions of dollars for your campaign and you take junkets, and I know junkets are supposed to be illegal now, but they're not. They all take them. When you take millions of dollars for your campaign, how do you think you're going to vote on an issue that you just got paid millions for? Yeah, we call it a campaign contribution. In South America, Central America, they're honest about it. We call it gratuities. You know, the nice part about Central and South America, though we lived there, Katie and I did, the nice part about it is when you buy a politician there, he stays bought. These crooks here, you buy them one day and they're going someplace else the next day. There is no honor among thieves.
Or a better deal.
They have arrogantly declared that God is in favor of abortion, homosexuality, sexual sin. They oppress the poor and sell out their offices and their nation for gain, committing sedition and treason. Barack Hussein Obama was the first president in American history not to turn over the power of the presidency to the next president without doing so peacefully. The evidence of the ongoing coup is overwhelming. But he's not the only one to have sold us out. He did it bigger than most, bolder than most. But George Bush led us into a war that's cost us $6.5 trillion. Both of them did. $6.5 trillion. And what do we got for it? What came out of it? Besides dead and crippled soldiers and maimed people with no intent of finishing the job. We've been in Afghanistan all of this time, and we've never finished the job because it's run by politicians, not by warriors. Warriors are smart enough to go in, kill who they have to kill, and come home. Politicians like to make it linger. And the pain just goes on and on and on and on and on. And young lives are destroyed and families are destroyed. And children's daddies are rotting in the sun. Some foreign sands. There are times when nations have to go to war. But war is not supposed to be ongoing forever. We don't stop wars. We just find new ones. Why? Eisenhower told us, said, beware of the military-industrial complex. Why? Because they're hungry for money. War is more profitable than drugs, more profitable even than human smuggling. John Dewey was born October 20th, 1859. He died June 1, 1952. Unfortunately, that was several years too late. He was born in 1859. If he'd have passed in about 1860, we'd have been a lot better off. John Dewey was an American philosopher, psychologist, educational reformer, whose ideas, they say, have been very influential in America. Let me tell you what he did. He took the school system from a system based upon learning to read from a Guffey reader and the Bible to a see and say mentality. We destroyed education intentionally. Kids were taught how to think in the early days of this country. Now they're taught what to think. What is education? What is indoctrination? And we can see where that's gotten us. It's gotten us rage-filled people walking in the streets, burning down the lives of other people. It has gotten us a $4.5, $5 trillion budget. It has gotten us $6 trillion missing from a $15 trillion U.S. economy because we bought the lie that COVID was going to kill everybody. Yeah, it's a bad disease, and we need to protect the elderly and those who are going to be subject to such things. But when you shut down an entire nation, you're destroying lives. Most people get it and feel like crap for a couple of weeks and then move on. But we needed to have protected the elderly. So what did we do in New York? We sent all the COVID patients back to the nursing homes. Took care of all those useless eaters, didn't we? They ain't producing anything anymore, and now they're gone. We got rid of them. So what if it was your dad or your grandpa or your granny? But a third of the deaths in New York were caused by sending sick people back into nursing homes. Then we had hospital ships sitting right offshore. We had a 3,000 bed hospital built by the government. They didn't use it. No, instead, we sent old people with COVID back to the most vulnerable population in America, the elderly. We have destroyed our educational system, and now we're reaping the rewards of that. Because we're electing these people to office. These are our leaders now. These are the people that hate America. They hate America because they've been trained to hate America. That's what the education system does now. It tells us that our founding fathers were evil. Every one of them. By the way, do you know that only about 36% of the founding fathers were slaveholders? The vast majority of them were abolitionists. He crafted an educational system that embraced evolution and taught a generation after generation after generation that man was just a smarter animal. Why evolution? Why was that such an important doctrine to bring into the schools? Because it destroys the concept of creationism all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. God didn't make the earth. Why, it just evolved. You see, we can't believe in an eternal God, but we can believe in an eternal universe. Now, I ask these guys, where did the universe come from? Well, it's eternal. What? It's eternal. You can believe in a vast, empty space that's eternal. Somehow, by accident, it just got there. Eternally. But you can't believe in an eternal God. You can believe in an eternal dust cloud that somehow blew up and created Earth and the stars and the planets. You can believe that. But you can't believe that God stretched forth his hand and made the worlds. You can believe that some giant gas cloud, an eternal gas cloud, got together with that dust cloud so it could blow up and make all these planets and earth and water, and amoebas and primordial ooze from which we supposedly crawled out. We can believe in an eternal hand that lit an eternal match that was attached to an eternal shoulder that lit that fire, that blew up that gas, that blew up that dust cloud and made all of this around us. My nice new white car sitting out there probably came from evolution. It blew up and there was my car. Tires, engine, everything. How stupid do you have to be to believe this stuff? An arm attached to an eternal body, attached to an eternal brain. Doesn't that sound a lot like God in the first place? But somehow we can believe in an eternal universe. And we've been educated to do it. That's education. God is a myth, but an eternal universe is gospel truth. We tell our children that they evolved from apes or ape-like creatures. Then all over the years we just got better at it. And then we wonder why they act like animals in the streets. You told them they were. You told them they were. You told them they were the herd. So they do what herds do. They're locusts. They consume everything in their path. Proverbs 9:10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and of knowledge of the holy is understanding. When you understand the holy, you understand everything. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the holy is understanding. My brother, you said it this morning. You take away knowledge of the holy. What is the knowledge of the holy? Yahweh's law. What was the law word? The law word was in the flesh. What? John 1:1, in the beginning was the law word. It says logos, which is the revealed righteousness of Yahweh. In the beginning was the law word, and the law word was with Yahweh, and the law word was Yahweh, and the law word became flesh and dwelt among us. And when you take that out, there is no more wisdom or knowledge or understanding. And in their blindness they grope, and they burn, and they loot, and they kill, and they murder. Why? Because they're enraged. Why are they enraged? Because they were told that things were going to work out. They were told that government's going to take care of everything. But government doesn't take care of everything. And the thing government cannot ever take care of is that hole in the heart of man. That hole in the spirit of man. You can't fill that with a government program. The loss of wisdom and knowledge of the holy things is a seed to our destruction. America's no longer a Christian nation. We're a post-Christian nation. You can close all of the major churches and there is no uproar, no outcry. Where are the preachers? Why aren't they telling the government, stick it? I'm holding church. We have a pandemic because we didn't teach people the things of God. And now that we've got a pandemic, you want to make it worse? Resistance to tyrants is your Christian duty. Our founding fathers said that. Guess who else said it? God. He said you ought to obey God rather than man.
Yeah.
And when we cower in the corner and obey the things that man commands in direct violation of what God says, what do you think is going to happen? Listen, you got an instruction book on what to do with your car. It says, don't do this because it'll be bad. If you hit a tree at 60, bad things happen. God made us. He says, if you do these things, it will destroy you. Don't do it. And we do it, and we get destroyed, and we say, this is God's fault. Look what God did to us. Train up your children in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they'll not depart from it, Proverbs says. So what do? We send our kids off 8 or 10 hours a day to these hellhole schools that teach them that they're animals, that there is no creation, that it was evolution, that tells them that human life doesn't begin until we say it begins, so you can kill a baby in the womb. How did we get to a point where we can convince mommies to rip a baby from their own body and call it choice? How did we get here? We were warned. The founding fathers way back then said, if you abandon those things that God has taught us, if you abandon those principles, you'll not last long. That's what Jefferson said. Jefferson, the supposed deist, he said, I tremble when I think that God is a just God. Do you think he's going to just let America slide? Because we're so special? Dwight Eisenhower gave us the warning. He said, beware of the military-industrial complex, because they want to steal your money, they want to steal your kids. But they're doing more than that. What have they done? They've said that God is not your protector, we are. Well, here's what Jeremiah said. You can have all the weapons of war you want, but when I come to judge you, he says, your fighting men are going to become as women. He said, all of your weapons of war are going to fail you. Your leaders are going to crawl in a hole and quiver. Like the mayor of Seattle did when they put the chop up, knowing that drugs and murder and rape, extortion, violence of every kind was going on. What did she do? She crawled in her office and quivered. She wasn't going to fight the mob. And of course, there's a political aspect to all of this too. They think the violence is going to hurt Trump's chances in the fall. They think the violence is going to work to their favor. Folks, there's a lot of profit in war. You and I pay the price for it every day. This is another seed in our destruction. By the way, another important thing about war, look at history. After every war, nations are more liberal coming out than they were going in. Follow the Greek Empire. Follow the Roman Empire. Follow all of the ancient empires. After every war, more and more is allowed. Look at World War II. It's a great example of this. Who left the home in World War II? Mama did. Why? She had to become Rosie the Riveter. She was doing her patriotic duty, right? World War II was what? Just an extension of World War I. World War I, according to Winston Churchill, was a European continental land skirmish that if the United States had stayed out, would have quickly ended because nobody could long afford to prosecute the war. But we got involved. And who did it? Woodrow Wilson. Probably one of the most evil men we've ever had in office. So we go to war and we come out. By the way, why did we go to war? Great Depression. We had to get out of the Great Depression. What caused the Great Depression? Government. Look back what happened. Sin is always followed by judgment. What happened in the 20s? The Roaring 20s. A time of sin and decadence and drunkenness and partying. Followed by what? The Depression of the 30s. Sin has consequences, always. So we had Franklin Delano Roosevelt come to office. Another evil SOB, son of Belial. He was a communist. And everything he did hurt America. It extended the Depression for probably close to 8 years. And how did we get out of it? Well, we had to go to war. So we went to war. And when we came out of it, Rosie the Riveter, who had done her patriotic duty, decided what? Wow, look how much more money our family has. Why, that little 1,100 square foot house, why, we can afford one twice that big now, as long as I stay out here. So Mama didn't come home. Mama stayed out working. Government isn't stupid. They looked at that and they said, hey, the median income per household just rose dramatically. So we adjusted our tax law. They're making more money, we can take a bigger chunk. So we kept taking bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger chunks. And if you compare the dollar from the turn of the century in 1900 to the value of the dollar today, it's worth less than a nickel. What happens to economies? When they're not tied to anything, when they have unjust weights and measures. Financial system collapsed. You know, God had just exactly the opposite. His system is Jubilee. Money became more valuable, not less valuable. Why? Because it was anti-inflationary. At year one, a property you leased or bought, you had for 50 years. At year 49, you had it for a year. And then it all had to go back to its original owner. That's the Jubilee. That's the Kondratiev wave theory of economics, as opposed to the Austrian system that we enjoy so much here, that leads us to inflation and economic collapses and whatnot. So we went into Gulf War I, we went into Gulf War II, we've got Afghanistan that is still going on, we're still there, we put $6.5 trillion into that effort. We haven't gotten another drop of oil. But it was well planned. Vietnam wasn't about stopping communism. Vietnam was about drugs, securing the Golden Triangle. The French tried it first. French Freemasonry drove the French government to go there. They got their keister handed to them in Vietnam. So the Brits said, well, we'll jump in here. So British Freemasonry jumped in. And guess what? They didn't want to go. They sent their surrogates, the United States. So we went. And we fought, and we fought, and we fought, and we won every battle and lost the war. Because we were never intended to win. It was never about winning a war. We had the military might to destroy them in a month. It wasn't about winning. It was about taking us to a place. We came up with a theory called mutually assured destruction. Part of the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1943. That mutually assured destruction that came out of there assumed that we were all going to keep going to war for the rest of forever and ever, but we didn't want it to get out of hand. So what did we do? We created mutually assured destruction. That was one of the tenets of the Bretton Woods Agreement. We hadn't even dropped the first A-bomb yet, but we knew it was coming. So America wins World War II. We are, in essence, the lone superpower. We've had to bail out England, we've had to bail out France, we had to bail out every country that was involved. We had to rebuild Japan. But we rebuilt Japan for a reason. There was gold. About $5 trillion in gold that had been buried by the Japanese army. And MacArthur and Truman found it. Black Eagle Trust, been operating since then. We have financed a whole lot of mischief with the Black Eagle Trust. Sometimes good stuff, by the way. We've got communism with it. Well, we financed a lot of bad stuff with it, too. In fact, Mr. Obama was the last president to use it because that trust has been hidden, I believe, from the current administration. We've replaced the dollar with false weights and measures. We've gone to war. We've done all of these things. Why? Because we were changing who we are. Richard Nixon pulled us off the gold standard. By the way, part of the Bretton Woods Agreement was that we replaced the British pound sterling with U.S. dollar because it was always gold backed. It was to be gold backed forever. Well, Franklin had already called in all of the gold. Franklin Roosevelt had already pulled it off. Remember? He pulled in all of the gold of the entire nation. He bought it at $20 an ounce and resold it at $35 an ounce the next day. He made it illegal to have at 20, raised the price to 35. He just effectively stole 40% of the United States wealth. Probably a sum in today's money worth about $200 trillion. Stolen. Richard Nixon finally took us off the gold standard in 1971. And we had this doctrine called mutually assured financial destruction. Why was it important that China came into the WTO? Because they're setting up a global governance system, and they had to have the Chinese in. Why? Because they were an emerging economic power. So we brought the Chinese in to the World Trade Organization. Mutually assured financial destruction. That's also in the Bretton Woods Agreement. Dr. Carol Quigley wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope. It's a 1,300-page tome. If you ever want some light reading, it's a good volume to pick up. It'll take you about 6 months to get through it. But when you're done reading it, you will find out that he was an apologist for the New World Order. And he wrote about mutually assured financial destruction, sewing all of the economies of the world together for global governance. Unjust weights and measures. It was the next step we took, the next seed of our destruction. So we've got a church that has failed us, a government that is playing God. We've got endless wars robbing us of our treasures. We've destroyed the home. We've taken the black community back in the days of desegregation, and we shipped their kids all over creation. And mom and dad no longer saw their kids. They weren't getting a better education. They were getting separated from the most Christian people. The most spiritual people in this country was black America at the time. And desegregation was built to destroy that. The church has let us down. The government has let us down. Education has let us down. I mean, look at the things we praise. We had this glorious revival in Pensacola. People were coming out of there with the spirit of a stork. We had some giggling prophet that went down there and said, "This is the spirit of laughter." Do you think when God looks down on America and sees the abortion, and homosexuality, and adultery, and the carnage, do you think he's sitting up in heaven giggling like an idiot?
No.
Do you think that he's sending the spirit of laughter to his people so we can all rejoice? and our paganism. The church has become very little more than a circus sideshow. We've gotten so wrapped up in the gifts that we've forgotten about the giver. Listen, I have seen so many miracles. I've seen the dead raised. I've seen sight restored. I've seen hearing restored. I've seen God's power work miraculously, time after time after time. But I've also seen the egocentric nonsense that passes for charismatic worship so often. Pentecostalism was hijacked. Azusa wasn't about this. Azusa was about unleashing the power of God on a nation that needed it. You recall, it was led by a one-eyed black man, the pastor of a soldier. I mean, the son of a soldier. And a pastor. The least likely guy in the world. Didn't have a lot of education, didn't have a lot of anything. But he had a lot of God. That's all he needed. And Azusa Street was birthed from that. The Hebrides revival was birthed from two old women who were completely useless in the eyes of everybody around them. One crippled, one blind. What good are they? They don't come to church, they can't get there. They aren't putting any money in the basket. They're drained on the government. What good are these old women? Tell you what good they are. They prayed down the fire of God on the Hebrides. The power of God was so strong on the Hebrides that ships sailing by, the sailors would fall under conviction and beg God to save them. That's the value they have. Surely at the commandment of the Lord came this upon Judah, to remove them out of his sight for the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he did. What did Manasseh do? It says he filled the streets of Jerusalem with blood. Manasseh shed very much innocent blood until he had filled Jerusalem from one end to the other, besides his sin, which he made Judah sin in doing evil in the sight of the Lord. What sin? Idolatry. Government became God under Judah. He said, I'm going to destroy you, Judah. I'm going to destroy you, Israel. Ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Whoever sheds the innocent blood, they've got to pay the price for the innocent blood. That's what he says right here. God says that's a sin that I will not forgive. I will not pardon. We get 325 million abortions to our credit. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to pay for it? The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, saying, surely I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. Are they lifting up a shout against us in the streets? Yale recently did a study, and they said that there are between 22 and 30 million illegals in this country. This is Yale, hardly a bastion of conservatism. These are not Trump supporters. These are not conservatives. These are people that did a simple study, and they said there are 22 to 30 million illegals in this country. The real number, according to some other statistics, could be as high as 40 million. We know there are about 4 to 5 million Islamists, Mohammedans in this country. But under the Obama regime, they were sneaking them in the back door as fast as they can. Avi Lipkin, who is a Jewish gentleman who comes here regularly, very connected to government and to, although he won't admit it, to intelligence sources, shall we say, in Israel. They believe that there are 7 to 10 times that many Islamists in this country. What does Islam believe? Islam says there are only 2 houses in the world. The house of Islam and the house of war. If you are not in the house of Islam, you are in the house of war. And what does Islam say? Islam says that every infidel that refuses to repent should be killed. And they say, yes, but only 10 to 15% of Islam is radicalized. Well, yes, stop and think about that number. Of all the Islamists in Dearborn Heights, how many reports do the police get of Islamic terrorist activity about to happen? Practically 0. Why? Intimidation. You mess with them, they kill you. They won't admit it, but the police in Detroit, the police in central Michigan have no-go areas. They don't go. They simply won't go. Sharia law is the law of the land there. Sharia law, by the way, is antithetical to everything we believe in our Constitution, everything we believe as Christian Americans. Suppose Avi's right. There are 25, 30, 40 million of them. With 40 million illegals, that means that there are about 80 million people here in this country that aren't supposed to be here or don't like us. What kind of damage could that do if... And then we've got Antifa. I just read a police bulletin on this, by the way. Confidential release to police departments in several jurisdictions that Brother Patrick sent me. They estimate that there are about 30,000 Antifa members in every state in the United States. Think about that. That's a big number, 30,000. What if Russia sent 30,000 troops here? Would it make you nervous? What if China sent 30,000 troops here? What if one of the Islamic countries, let's say Iran, sent 30,000 troops here? Would it make you nervous? Now, what if they sent 30,000 troops to every state? Would it make you nervous? Antifa's ties to militant Islam have been well documented. They're not anti-fascist, they're anti-American. Black Lives Matter have been very closely linked to militant Islam and to Antifa. Black Lives Matter don't matter to Black Lives Matter. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been burning the stores and the houses, looting the neighborhoods of the people they're supposed to be caring for. Folks, there ain't no innocent bystanders in the middle of a riot. If you're not trying to stop it, if you're not reporting it to police, you're a co-conspirator. There's a reason they don't report. Try and get information on a crime in an impoverished community. I grew up in the ghetto. You don't say squat. You say squat, somebody's going to be looking for you. So we've got 80 million people not willing to say a word about anything to anyone. What is the law of the Lord for those who come into a land? Israel was supposed to do what? Take care of the poor and the stranger in the land, right? But what was the law of the Lord for the stranger in the land? He said the same law that applies to Israel applies to the stranger in the land. They violate it, they suffer the same penalty as a Jew. There was no difference. Why? Because law is law, period. So look at our legal situation here coming in. What's the first thing that happens when you come into this country by the back door? You see a guy. What does the guy do? He gives you papers. What papers? Birth certificate, driver's license, social security card. You just committed 3 felonies. And that's on your first couple of days here. And then you go get a bank account. And then you sign up for welfare. And then you sign up for education for your kids. And then you sign up for medical treatment. And then you get SNAP. You know, that card. You've just committed 8 to 10 felonies in the first week here. If you did it, you'd go to jail. You did it, you'd be under the jail. That's how it works. But these 8, 10 felonies are overlooked. Why? Because these are good law-abiding citizens just trying to find a better way of life. Whose jobs do they take? Entry-level workers. The young, the less educated. Who riots in the streets? The young and the less educated. Why? They're angry. Why are they angry? Because things don't work for them. They're hopeless. And when people are hopeless, they're filled with rage. Listen, you sneak up behind somebody and scare the crap out of them. What's the first thing they do? They get angry at you. Fear brings rage. Their lives are filled with fear. And they're filled with rage. Since Ronald Reagan, we have essentially had open borders. We've had 40 million people come in. And I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars. Jeremiah says. Why? We're being destroyed from within. The locust is eating us day by day by day, like a plague going across the land. Why? Because there's nothing to stop it. There is no impediment to it. There is no impediment to evil because the church is cowering in the corner, won't even open their doors. They won't even open their doors. They sit shivering in fear of government. Oh my heavens, they took a lady who opened up a beauty parlor and threw her in jail. What are they going to do to me if I have 1,000 people in my church? What's God going to do to you if you don't? You're going to fear God, you're going to fear man. Of course, they tell us that we bring these people in here because Americans won't do these jobs. I mean, who wants to do a job for $5 an hour? $5 an hour is slave wages. We have made slaves again. You say we've ended slavery? No, we haven't. Big corporations are enslaving everybody. Why do you think we have these illegals here? Because they work for nothing. Americans won't do those jobs. No, not for that kind of money. But it costs us $500 billion a year to bring that free labor here. Wouldn't we rather pay an extra dime or 15 cents for a bunch of grapes and not have people working as slaves or growers? To have a living wage coming out of that? To have the ability to feed your family and take care of your loved ones? When the stranger shall sojourn with thee, and will keep the Passover of the Lord, let his males be circumcised, and let them come near and keep it. And he shall be as one that is born in the land, for no uncircumcised person shall eat thereof. One law shall be unto him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourns among you. Leviticus 24. You shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger, as for the one of your own country. For I am the Lord your God. I am Yahweh your Elohim, your judge. That's literally what it says. I am Yahweh your Elohim. I am Yahweh your judge. I have one law system. When you throw out the law, you're throwing out the Messiah. What else are you doing? You're throwing out the eternal judgment of Yahweh. When you set up any other law system besides his, you're an idolater. That's what he says. So when you have a law that says abortion is okay, you have idolatry. And you are sacrificing your children to the god Moloch, the god of pleasure. Yeah, we can go out and sow our wild oats, and when we don't get a crop failure, we can kill it. We have a welfare system that says, my government shall supply all your need according to their riches and glory. What does Yahweh say? Lest a man work, neither should he eat. Why did they leave the corners of the field? Whether it was the harvest of grapes or the harvest of wheat or the harvest of barley, whatever it was, why did they leave the corners of the field? Because it was Yahweh's law, so that the poor would not be without. But the poor did not get meals delivered to their home. They didn't get a check delivered to their home. They didn't have somebody come by and hand them a handout. He said, get your keister out to the field, pick the barley, pick the wheat, pick the grapes. Unless a man work, neither should he eat. Well, we thrown that law out too. Now you can sit home and do whatever you want all day long and get this nice little check. We have chosen badly on so many fronts. We wonder why America's in trouble. It's in trouble because we put it in trouble. Listen, we should have known what Islam was. You know the first war we fought after the American Revolution? The very first war we fought? The Barbary pirates. What were they? The remnants of the Ottoman Empire, the Islamists, the Mohammedans. Look at the Marine Hill. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea. First to fight for right and freedom and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of the United States Marines. What are the halls of Montezuma and what are the shores of Tripoli? Mexican-American War. Mid-1800s. We fought all the way down to Mexico City. All the way down, conquered the whole thing. The last bastion of strength they had was a castle. They named it the Halls of Montezuma. It was built about 2 centuries after they killed Montezuma and chased him off. That's the Halls of Montezuma. We conquered all the way down to Mexico City and gave it all back and set the border of Texas at the Rio Grande River. How many Hispanic families in Mexico wish that we had kept all the land down to Mexico City? They'd be Americans living in America as opposed to Mexicans living in a third world nation of corruption and crime. And if you've been to that border area, it is bizarre. I've got oil clients down there near the border area. We have to park 50 miles away and they come get us. Because if you park your car down there, you won't have anything left when you get back. I've got an old car with some problems. I'm thinking of driving it down there on a work detail. Yeah. Got to check my insurance. The halls of Montezuma. The shores of Tripoli. What are the shores of Tripoli got to do with anything? First war. First war. Fighting Islamists who were kidnapping our sailors, cleaning out our ships, taking our goods, demanding ransom. Islamists have never changed. They are exactly what they are. Islam has never been spread by evangelism. It's always been spread at the point of a sword, always. Because who in their right mind wants to get involved in Islam? After the American Revolution, our first war was the Barbary pirates. The time is 1801. Thomas Jefferson is the 3rd president of the United States. He was Secretary of State under George Washington. At the time, he was assigned to negotiate some kind of a deal with the Barbary pirates. Remember, we're a brand new nation. Washington's our first president. Jefferson's Secretary of State, and they give him the job of negotiating with these crazy Islamists. We got a little problem. We can't pay them ransom. We don't have any money. We can't go down there and slaughter them because we ain't got a navy. We barely have a country. We're in debt up to here. Remember, France had to bail us out. If it hadn't been for a Jewish gentleman, we'd have lost the war. But a Hebrew man in New York financed the American Revolution when Washington had nowhere else to turn. So here's old Jefferson. He goes down to the Barbary pirates and tries to negotiate a deal with them. Didn't work out very well. Determined at that point in time that at some point in time he would be president, and when he was, he would not deal with these Barbary pirates in this way. Adams was, of course, the second president of the United States. He had the same problems Washington had. You pay these guys a bribe and then they wouldn't stay gone. It only lasts a year or two, because remember, one of the creeds of Islam is lie to infidels at every opportunity to trick them into doing what you want them to do. Because Allah says it's a blessed thing to lie to infidels. They even have a special word for it. I used to know it, but I can't remember it now. So it's 1801, Jefferson becomes president. 1802, these Barbary pirates have grabbed some of our ships. So he goes to Congress and says, I need some money. We got to get down there and fix this mess. And I won't get into all the details. It's a long, and by the way, if you haven't read it, it's a positively breathtaking story of what he did. But he went down in 1801 and 1802 and started negotiating with them. He finally sent enough ships down there that they knew we were serious, and we negotiated a deal. But the deal didn't last, of course. Unfortunately, in 1812, we got into another little skirmish. The British, which had the British Bank here, the Bank of England, we didn't renew their charter. They were mad about it, so they declared war on us in 1812. And by the way, that war didn't end until we agreed to let the Brits come back in with their Bank of England, which was the early forerunner of the Federal Reserve. And our Federal Reserve is still tied very much to the Bank of England. So 1812, we go to war. Madison's president now. Madison says, my heavens, we've got a problem with these people. So he finally decides to send a fleet down there. And it wasn't until 1815 that Madison finally solved the problem. He was right on the verge of taking all of the cities. And then they decided they would negotiate and did. But Libya was the ringleader of the whole thing, what they called Tripolians. Tripoli. Congress approved the money, they fought the war, they won. Sent Admiral Decatur down there. Admiral Decatur decided that he was going to clean things up and did. And by the way, remember, now these are the days when you don't have communication. So you've got to send a pretty smart guy to do a job like this, because he has to be a great negotiator, he has to be a great warrior, he has to be a great admiral, he has to be a weatherman, because he has to know what the weather is doing, because it really is a big deal for fleets when you've got a wooden ship and a sail. So you get this brilliant Admiral Decatur. He goes down and does the job. But we've been fighting Islam since. It's never ended. It has never ended. So we have an enemy we know wants to destroy us, an enemy that is completely unscrupulous, an enemy that murder is his stock and trade. So what do? We bring millions of them into the midst of our country. Yeah. Sin makes you stupid. Lots and lots and lots of sin makes you lots and lots and lots of stupid. And we can prove it. Well, by late June of that year, 1815, Decatur had pretty much won the battle. It took him about 3 months when we got serious about winning a war. 3 months. He beat the Barbary pirates that, by the way, were extorting England, France, the Dutch, the Russians even. They extorted everybody. Madison said enough. Brits couldn't beat them because they had politicians running the War Department. Madison sent down an admiral and said, do what you got to do, come back with a victory. Take as many scalps as you got to, but come back with a victory. And he did. But at that point in time, we were a godly nation. We're not that anymore. I don't know if you saw the president's speech last night. I watch every speech. Doesn't matter who the president is. Sometimes I suffer through them. Usually I suffer through them. Last night's speech was inspiring. He talked about God, country, and what we're supposed to stand for. But we have spent a lot of years now planting the seeds of our own destruction. We brought in Barack Hussein Obama on a level of evil probably on a par with Roosevelt and with some of the worst we've had, including Wilson, who was probably the biggest scumbag to hit, but until Obama. Obama's State Department went to work in the Middle East. They overthrew the government of Egypt. They overthrew the government of Tunisia. They overthrew Libya, killed Gaddafi. Bush had already taken care of Saddam Hussein. Now listen, all these guys are dirtbags. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an admirer of Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi. These are evil guys. But they had one thing that their countries needed. Tyranny. You had warring tribes that have been killing each other for thousands of years. The only way to keep a lid on it is to have a guy that is so mean, so vicious, they're afraid to mess with him. So that's what they did. Listen, you can't expect righteousness out of Islam. Islam is a nation built on blood. Islam is a system built on blood. You need someone like that, a strong man, to control that. You see, unfortunately, when you will not be governed by the laws of Yahweh, you'll be governed by tyranny. That's just how it is. Liberalism, that is, the discarding of Yahweh's law, whether it's to Islam or to any other idolatrous religion. When you discard Yahweh's law, that is liberalism. When liberalism comes in, it's always followed historically by tyranny. Always. Why? Because if the people are not self-governed, they have to be governed by external forces. And those external forces always have to resort to tyranny to make it happen. The seeds of our destruction. So we overthrow Libya, and now what is it? It's the Wild West. We overthrow the Sudan. What's now out there? The Wild West. We turn Tunisia upside down. What is it now? It's an anti-American state. Why? Because we took the pro-American state and overturned it. We threw out the leader of Egypt, who, by the way, was not a good guy. But he was better than the guy they brought in. Benghazi. What went on in Benghazi? We lost Ambassador Stevens. We lost a bunch of guys there. Why? Because Ambassador Stevens knew that the Obama regime was running guns through Libya and bringing them to ISIS and to Al-Qaeda. Well documented. We've got pictures of the ships unloading the arms. We've got pictures of the invoices, the bills of lading, which the shipping masters kept. Why'd they keep them? To protect themselves. Because if they were charged with piracy, they wanted to have proof that what they had done was not what they said was done. So they kept them. Now we know thousands of tons of weapons were sent up there. And Ambassador Stevens knew it. He was going to rat out the administration. So what happened to him? Benghazi. What happened at Benghazi? Hillary Clinton gave a stand down order. The State Department said you do not go in to help. Why? Stevens had to die, that's why. They didn't care what else happened, but Stevens had to die. So he did. Because it was a gun running operation that was about to be exposed. You see, when you do what we have done, you create the seeds of our own destruction. And that's where we are. We've created the seeds of our own destruction. I got so much more that I'd like to share, but I'm not going to. We'll make it next week. And I'll do it because it's the 4th of July, and some of the things that I have yet on my heart, and some of the things I have yet to say, I don't want to say today. When God asked, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? how has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? I have laid a snare for thee, and thou art taken, O Babylon. Thou wast not aware. Thou art found and also caught, because thou hast striven against the Lord. The Lord openeth his armory, and hath brought forth the weapons of his indignation. For this is the work of the Lord our God of hosts in the land of the Chaldeans. What are the Chaldeans? The land of the financiers and the bankers and the big business guys. That's what Chaldeans were. We cannot, unfortunately, brothers and sisters, we cannot change prophecy. Prophecy is going to be prophecy. America is Babylon. But we can stay the hand of judgment. Aaron stayed the hand of judgment. He obeyed God and got between the living and the dead. And now the question is, will you get between the living and the dead? There's either revival or destruction. And Abraham bargained with God. God, if there's 50 left, will you save it? If there's 40 left, will you save it? If there's 30 left, 20 left, 10 left, will you save it? We need to stand in the gap for America. I have a dream, and I'll share it with you at some point in time, that I believe God has given me. But I can tell you this. The thing we need to pray for right now, this moment, this hour, this second, is that God will send a supernatural anointing of prayer on some people. Listen, we can bring out guns, and we can fight Antifa, and we can fight BLM. We can get just as violent as they can. Conservative America is probably more well-armed than any other country on earth. That isn't the answer. That doesn't solve the problem. That brings blood. That's not how we protect America. We protect America with revival. We protect America by returning to the God of our fathers. We protect America by finally getting serious about prayer and telling some of these highbrow preachers, open your doors, open your hearts, open your minds, stop and think about what you're doing. Do you fear government or do you fear God? We need a supernatural anointing of prayer. Because we're going to have to attack the darkness where it is. Spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. So that is my call to America on 4th of July. Yes, have a hot dog, have a hamburger. Grab a slice of ice cold watermelon. We've made some homemade ice cream. All of those things are wonders. But there is yet one thing needed.
Amen.
Amen.
Because without that, all of the weapons we have will mean nothing.
We'll be hungry for it.
All of the violence we have will do no good.
Absolutely.
We have to dispel the anger and the rage with one thing. The peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
Messiah no longer on tablets of stone, but now written on the hearts of mankind.
Amen.
Not that we can act like him, but that we can die to self, crucify the flesh, that he might live through us. And then you're walking out your destiny, real destiny. And your real destiny is to stay the head of judgment by spreading righteousness faster than COVID-19. So when people see you, they no longer see you. They see Messiah living through you. Father, we just ask that in all that we do, you would be blessed, you would be honored, that our very lives would give you glory. That people would see how we live and how we conduct ourselves, and they would know that we are different. And we are different because we have peace. Because we live in your righteousness and therefore in your blessing. Father, we ask that in all we do, you would teach us to pray. To agonize in prayer for a sick and suffering and bleeding nation. Give us a heart that is absolutely compelled to bring righteousness back to not just the whole nation, but to each of us. That we be so on fire that everybody around us is just warmed and begs to know who we are and what we've got that they don't. Give us answers that we might be answers to them. Give us faith that we might show them our faith. Give us righteousness that they might see our lives and understand that there is peace. In Yeshua's name.